Welcome back to the Constantine Reviews with episode 9, part 2 of the Saint of Last Resorts. And when we last left off, everyone was in a pretty sticky situation, from Zed, who had been captured by religious zealots, and Constantine, who was left to die at the hands of an Invonche. And there's a joke/allegory there about how the show died an equally horrific death due to its cancellation, but we'll just let that go and get on with the episode. The episode begins getting straight to the point with the Invonche looking to chomp on Constantine, and while John bleeds profusely, Anne-Marie gets out of the sewer with the babies, not really sticking around long enough to give Chaz an explanation. Below in the sewers, Constantine takes drastic measures to ensure his survival by removing all spiritual wards and protections. He's stopped briefly by the Invonche biting his leg, but he continues calling forth Pazuzu to enter his body, burning its symbol on his arm. So when the Invonche catches a glimpse of the demon now residing inside, he clears off pretty quickly, and Constantine is now fully healed. John must be kicking himself that of all the demons to get possessed by, is the one from The Exorcist. I mean, what are the odds of that? Just make sure and keep him away from crucifixes. No one wants to see that. And now that John is out of danger, of course Manny appears to do nothing, yet admonish Constantine for choosing evil powers. But John makes a good point.
I didn't see God coming down that tunnel to help me, or you.
You didn't even ask, John.
Manny, God's track record in this sort of thing is not really the best. I mean, if John actually had asked for his help, that would have been a green tick next to his name, and God still wouldn't have done anything. Yeah, I think Manny is forgetting all those times where John has actually needed help, and nothing happened. And Manny is so disgusted by John's actions that he chooses not to help him this time. Go back to my previous comment to see why that's not much of a big deal. We then catch up with Zed unconscious in the back of a truck, who suddenly has a vision of Anne-Marie in a cage, her eyes bleeding, which is a lot more symbolic than her usual visions, but Zed quickly wakes up from it. Zed's captor is pleased she still has visions, as this will please her father, and at the mention of him, Zed bangs on the door, forcing the driver to pull over to dose her with knockout juice again. But fortunately, he's a complete idiot, and Zed jumps him, injecting him instead, before leaving the driver on the road and taking the truck. And sadly, that will be the last remnant of Zed's history we'll ever get to see. I assume there was more, but cancelled before we got to it. So by no fault of the show, this plot has absolutely no payoff, which is a shame because it would have helped enhance Zed's character. Back in the sewers, Chaz searches for John, but as he was right next to the entrance, he's easily found and taken back to the convent. He explains everything about what happened, including the whole possession thing, but John does say that the possession won't take hold for a while yet, so he has some time to cast it out. Chaz asks what if he can't get the demon out, and John matter-of-factly says that he'll need to kill him. However, before that, John wants to try a self-exorcism, but of course, Pazuzu doesn't really like that. Well, that's pretty much a standard demon possession response, which is a shame because I would never really call this show standard. It would have been better if the show had really made the concept of demon possession its own, instead of just copying what The Exorcist did. Chaz quickly updates Zed on the events, but of course she's tight-lipped about what's happened to her. She volunteers to go to Mexico, which, after hiding from a car, is probably more running from her own problems. Meanwhile, Constantine is getting a police siren wake-up call, because, rather unexpectedly, the demon has killed a load of gangbangers. I'm not really sure why the demon chose to do that. Yes, it was Constantine to survive, so it could have been self-preservation, but the demon still went there in the first place. You could also argue it wanted Constantine to get arrested, so he couldn't get rid of it, but there was no guarantee that would have happened, so it's all a bit too convenient for my liking. So now Constantine is sent straight to prison with no lawyer and no trial, still covered in blood, which clearly makes no sense, and just rushes along the plot to get to the supernatural stuff. You know, this is a two-parter story, you really didn't need to rush the hell out of part 2. Some of this could have been sorted out in the last part. Or hell, use the gap between the last episode and this one as a way of showing time passing. But there is some sense as John speaks to the British consulate, who attempts to get him freed from prison. Well, Mexican prison anyway. John claims self-defense, but the official tells him the investigation could take weeks, which results in John rather stupidly scuttling his chances of getting out, as he practically attacks the guy, forcing the guards to take him away. But we'll soon see it might not have made a difference anyway. Back with Chaz, he meets up with Zed and admits John's current whereabouts are unknown, and she wants to know what will happen if John doesn't get the demon out. Chaz simply states that Constantine's consciousness will extinguish, and the demon's freed. Oh, but don't worry, Chaz will make sure to kill John before that happens. Which seems a little aloof of Chaz to just easily accept that, but I think it's a case of this situation has been talked about well in advance, and Constantine has come up with protocols for Chaz to follow in case he was ever possessed. Probably thanks to Newcastle, he's well aware of the damage it could cause. Back in prison, John's desperate to get exercising and finds a fellow prisoner, who's quite the tradesman. John asks about getting a few supplies, handing over his wallet, which is actually the British official's wallet from before, so Constantine wasn't just being a raving loony. The tradesman informs John that he's got some enemies in the prison thanks to his earlier killing spree, as if things couldn't get any worse. But then Manny appears to complete the hat trick.
You got a light? Those things will kill you.
Yes, thanks for that subtle nod to the Dangerous Habits storyline. Something I would have appreciated gladly if we weren't in post-cancellation. John confesses to Manny that he's not ready to die, not because he fears what awaits him, but because he's got so much more to do, which is certainly more selfless than the usual things he says. And it even seems to convince Manny, telling John that he hopes he finds what he needs in a not too subtle read between the lines kind of way, before he promptly disappears. Back with Zed and Chaz, they've decided to confront Anne-Marie because of her ability to astral project and find John. However, Anne-Marie is acting all self-righteous, still convinced that John would have killed the baby, which I still doubt. But her religious shield soon drops when Chaz tells her that John is still alive.
You're the one who put a bullet in his chest. He's just trying to save his life.
While risking the lives of everyone around him, including yours.
He's quick to add that it's their choice to join John in the fight.
The rising darkness, is it? I hate to burst your bubble, but the Roman Catholic Church have been fighting that for centuries. It's why I joined the convent. Except they know right from wrong here.
A religious organisation knowing right from wrong. Yes. But this is a straight face right now. I am not about to stir controversy today. Anne-Marie claims they're working personally for God, but Zed bursts her bubble there when she mentions that John has a personal angel friend helping him out. And of course that changes her tune, deciding to help John. Which, forgive my cynicism, but that seems incredibly self-serving and not exactly sticking to her convictions. So she's fine with shooting a man because she's working for God, but when she hears someone else has a more direct communication, she pulls a complete 180. I tell you, my opinion of her is just getting lower and lower. But anyway, the plot thickens as we move to the British consulate, where the earlier official speaks to a suspicious-looking guy in his shadowy office. And it's revealed that the official was getting information on Constantine, and he'll ensure John remains in prison, because the suspicious one is working for the Brujeria. In what capacity, we're not sure, but he does get a bit more sinister when he does this. Back at the prison, John's found the chapel.
What is it you're looking for?
Purified honey wax, holy water, a full-length mirror would be very useful.
Huh. I wonder if that's a reference to the film and its use of a mirror to exorcise a demon. Probably not, but it's nice to think about. However, in the chapel, it's clear there's no honour amongst thieves, as the tradesman has sold John out to the gang. However, as the demon senses that John's life is in danger, it takes control, killing the gangbangers pretty quickly, and very gruesomely, judging by the classic blood under the door shot. John soon wakes up outside, covered in yet more blood, wanting to have a little chat with the guy who set him up. And he says the gang runs the prison, so he had no choice, but John's got some new information.
No, I run this place!
That was pretty badass. Constantine knows that the demon is trying to keep him in the prison, because then it just has to watch the clock count down. But John's doomsaying is cut short when Anne-Marie appears, wanting to talk with him. Anne-Marie is still full of herself, saying that he'll disappoint Zed, or she'll die before that happens. She asks about Pazuzu and what John plans to do if he can't get it out. And then she disappears, wishing him a good luck, which is what I expect from her at this point. I'm really getting sick of her attitude. She needs to take her head out of her arse and realise she's no better than John. Outside the prison, Chaz and Zed have arrived, and to emphasize what I said about John being prepared for this kind of situation, Chaz shows Zed a tape of John reciting exorcism rituals in 50 different languages, and also a ceremonial knife, which is the last resort. It shows that John certainly plans very well, but I would have thought he'd have a few more plans outside of exorcism or stab in the heart. Surely there are a few more things to consider. But I guess he knows what he's doing. Chaz isn't sure how to get into the prison, but Zed decides to take her bra off and go in pretending to be a prostitute, giving the guards some money to be let in, which was very clever and street savvy. Now let's look at Chaz's attempt. At least it saved him a few bucks, I guess. John is given a conjugal visit, which gives him a chance to speak with Zed, but the demon starts getting riled up.
Demon wants to sow his oats.
You can't blame him really, given the circumstances. Also, Pazuzu is said to have a serpentine penis, so isn't that nice? And things get even more kinky when a nun enters. Okay, let's stop that joke, shall we? Anne-Marie managed to get in because she's a nun and they take that sort of thing seriously. And she is actually there to help, dressing Zed like a nun. From prostitute to nun in under a minute. That's impressive. And also, John gets a change of clothes. And while John changes, Zed asks Anne-Marie if she should be scared for John. But Anne-Marie assures her that John believes he's got everything under control. But she also contradicts herself, saying Zed should leave as soon as the situation is resolved. But despite being apparently eaten alive, the consulate official has shown up at the prison again, and he's clearly the most suspicious person in there, which is quite the feat. And at the same time, John and the others have managed to get into the gym to perform the exorcism, tying John down, when the official makes his move. And while he does that, the exorcism has begun. But there's a problem, as the holy water doesn't affect John, meaning the demon's in too deep, which is Snaky's cue to appear. And he's revealed to be Nahash, the serpent from the Garden of Eden, who's there to kill Constantine. In the original Hebrew, the serpent is identified as Nahash, so kudos on that detail. However, I do have a problem with him being here, because he's supposed to be the trickster, a master manipulator, so why the hell is he there just to kill someone? Yes, he worked his ways on the consulate guy, but come on, this is the great tempter of Eve. They could have done much more with him. The demon starts taking control and John tells Anne-Marie to use the knife, so she prepares to stab him. And at the same time, Nahash kills Chaz, giving Anne-Marie the opportunity to stab Nahash in the back, killing him, but also destroying the knife. So they're basically up the creek without a paddle at this point. After the excitement, John wakes up, appropriately enough, in the morgue, and at first it seems to be the demon in control, freaking Anne-Marie out, but John soon takes control back. Chaz wakes up in a body bag, wanting to know the plan, but John's out of ideas. Anne-Marie suggests going to the mill to perform the exorcism, but John won't last that long, so they need to slow the demon down. So how are they going to do that? Well, John gets his trader friend to bring him a shit ton of heroin. So we then get a scene of cooking heroin and injecting a lethal dose, which understandably seems to kill John. Which, considering that this is the show that was very reluctant to show Constantine smoking on screen, it's a pretty steep curve to go straight to heroin. It kind of makes all those scenes of cleverly showing smoking but not really showing smoking ultimately pointless now, doesn't it? Anne-Marie and Chaz cart John's body out of the prison, but there's a problem, as the guard will recognise Chaz. So Anne-Marie uses her astral projection ability. But really, what can she possibly do to distract a guy that completely?
I've been robbed! Thieves, they stole my clothes! Can you help me?
Well, okay then. Proceed. Anne-Marie's nakedness works like a charm as they manage to get John out of the place, with Anne-Marie's projection disappearing, freaking everyone out. But they do get to the mill and start preparing for the exorcism. John wakes up and tells Anne-Marie she'll have to perform the ritual, as the demon won't listen to him. But given how the one they did in Newcastle went, Anne-Marie is understandably nervous to say the least. But John reassures her that because of that experience, it makes her uniquely qualified to perform the ritual. So after a few blessings, the ritual begins as the demon starts to struggle. However, John suddenly says that the ritual isn't working. He's found another way and he needs to be untied. And it's a trick, isn't it? Yeah, not exactly your best there, Pazuzu. And that's when the demon starts with the usual taunting and insults, going through all of them, bringing up all the skeletons in their closets, which makes it very difficult to not think of the exorcist, especially when John starts floating off the bed. Anne-Marie says she can't do the ritual, but Zed tells her it's because of her own guilt for what happened in Newcastle and for showing John the world of magic. Which, the theme of guilt is something that always comes up when one of the Newcastle crew is in an episode, and it does tie all those episodes together quite nicely. So now Anne-Marie has been given the pep talk, she starts the ritual again, this time with much more fervour, pulling out all the stops, and pretty quickly she manages to banish the demon, as the mark on John's arm disappears, and he's back to his usual self, with Manny appearing to show his approval. And the episode ends with everyone giving their goodbyes to Anne-Marie, and John apologises for all that he put her through. But Anne-Marie knows he doesn't do sorry. He does thank Chaz and Zed for all their help, and to prepare for things to get worse. With this little moment from John. Which could mean a whole multitude of things, but in the comics, Constantine does gain supernatural abilities, like being unnaturally lucky after he has sex with a succubus, so this could have been another explanation for that, some lingering remnant of Pazuzu. But that's just me speculating. On the whole, this episode is pretty decent. The biggest problem I have with it, though, is that they do rush a lot of the setup, and Part 2 doesn't really hold up to the build-up in Part 1, but it is decent. And now we're in the second half of the season, things will be ramping up pretty quickly. So look forward to that. And until then, see you next time.